What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside, the show where we take a look at the AI that is layered throughout the world of technology, and it just does not back down. This world is transforming with artificial intelligence at the core right now, and we're going to be talking about a few stories in which the world is doing that. But joining me, as always, my co-host and friend, Jeff Jarvis. How you doing, Jeff?
Hello. Yeah, you'd think some week we'd run out and say, nothing new, nothing happening.
There's nothing happening. Boy, it's really boring. But I mean, honestly, like, this is why I wanted to do an AI show, because it felt like an inflection point. It felt like a new technology that wasn't going to fizzle out and die and become like a little footnote. And I think it's proving week after week that this has lasting power. It's here to stay, and it's making a dramatic impression on the development of the world.
Yeah, it obviously is. And I think that the number of that again stories is limited. Oh, a new model. Yeah, okay, it's faster, right? There's a little bit of that, but the implications just keep spreading in surprising ways.
Totally.
So that's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for, and we got a lot to talk about this week. Before we get started, huge thank you to our supporters on Patreon, because you really are driving this show to a large degree, making it possible week after week, month after month. Colin Murphy is our patron of the week. Colin, thank you so much for your continued support. You've been there from early on, and we really do appreciate it. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. If you would like to support us, you can do that. Head on over. And then if you happen to be watching live, we have a lot of people watching live week after week. I like to just make sure that you know that if you aren't watching live in the future and you still want to find the show, just go search for AIinside.show and subscribe. That way you won't miss it in the future. And apologies, because I know that my sound is a little different. I'm testing out a new microphone, and sometimes the best way to test it is to just throw it into the feed and see how it works.
I think it sounded good.
All right, cool. It's the Dockman DA. What is it? DA87i. It is a. This is probably the wrong show to go nerdy on microphone technology, but it is a Neumann U87 recreation, which in the music production world, it's a very popular, very expensive microphone that's been around forever. This is like a recreation of that. So anyways, hope you like it. I'm going to be listening with different ears than you are, probably, just to kind of see what it sounds like. But apparently I need a microphone show, but I don't have the time for that. I only have the time for AI Inside. So let's talk about artificial intelligence, starting with a story that I had to kind of scratch my head because I saw it yesterday at the top of Tech Meme. And I was like, all right, why is everybody freaking out about this? Maybe you can tell me, but I think I have at least a little more of an indication as far as what it's all about. Nvidia and AMD striking major deals to supply advanced semiconductors to Humain, that's Humain, of course, AI, which is a new Saudi Arabian AI company that's backed by the kingdom's public investment fund. So this is part of a $10 billion initiative to build these massive AI data centers as well as infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and the US. And I think this story probably got a lot of attention. I mean, there's a lot of politics involved in technology right now, especially with the US administration and their kind of new-ish, different-ish stance and perspective on what AI can mean for U.S. innovation in the world and wanting to lead that charge. This seems to kind of play into this, but I'm curious to know kind of what's your perspective on this? Why is this important?
I think this is as much as anything a political story.
Yeah.
This is Trump over in Saudi Arabia trying to make an impression. He brought a lot of tech CEOs with him, including Jensen Huang from Nvidia. Mm-hmm. And I think that OpenAI is making noises about doing, one of their big hosting things they're planning to do somewhere in the Middle East. And so, and now Nvidia is selling a whole mess of its chips to Saudi Arabia for a new venture called Humain, spelled Humain, I think.
Yeah.
It is started by MBS, which brings with it, especially as a journalist, a certain level of controversy
Baggage.
Here, but that's where we are right now. And it had an impact on Nvidia. Nvidia stock went up 5% in the day because of it. And after Nvidia took a huge hit in stock recently, I just looked it up this morning, it's down only 5% from its high.
wow,
Everybody's
okay.
down 5% from their high right now. So Nvidia is back on track to be Nvidia. And I think selling 18,000 chips to Saudi Arabia and opening up that world for AI at the same time it's being shut off in China. But I'm also suspecting that Jensen Huang coming and being Trump loves announcements. So by making this announcement, as I say, it's a political act, and Wong being there to do that with him, I'm going to bet that actually has more impact on China. That he's going to want to open that up some more and see where that goes. And so I think that this made news not because it's any technological big deal, but because politically and in business, there'll be more of a future in the Mideast.
Yeah, 100%. That sounds exactly right. And I think it comes up, in some of the following stories that we talk about time and time again. Because actually, as I'm looking through the rundown, there's a decent amount of kind of like politics intersecting with AI right now. But China really is at least here in the US, China is the target as far as competitors on the worldwide stage when it comes to innovation. So that's going to come up time and time again. And it seems in this case, like the US making these relationships with countries that will further enshrine the United States as the technological leader when it comes to that, in opposition to China, which seems like the kind of the target or the punching bag right now for the US when it comes to technological innovation and being seen on the world stage as a leader.
Yeah, and I think to stay on there for a second, I just did a search on China and AI in Google News. So just a quick sampling. China's AI models are closing the gap, but America's real advantage lies elsewhere, says Rand. There's a lot happening here in China. So, hold on a second, I lost it. Then Bloomberg, DeepSeek's tech madman founder is threatening U.S. dominance in AI race. China's AI-powered humanoid robots aim to transform manufacturing. U.S. to boost Saudi AI chip access even as China issues linger. So these are the headlines going around here. And I think that anything happening internationally around AI, China is always going to be there after the comma.
Yeah, indeed. And actually, one of the next stories kind of ties right into this perfectly, where AI executives recently were advocating for strict oversight, right? Like it wasn't that long ago, a couple of years ago, it was all about AI leaders saying, yeah, we want to grow and we want to be all powerful in artificial intelligence, but we welcome regulation. And everybody's like, oh, really? Like you're okay with that? Of course, they welcome regulation that's beneficial to them because they're massive behemoths and it, pushes out the smaller players, if they're able to kind of influence how that is created. Now we are in a position where they are singing a different tune. And this is a story on the Washington Post that you put in the rundown. I'm happy that you did. The winds have really changed, have shifted to where these companies, and in this case, it's Sam Altman at a Senate hearing last Thursday, have kind of transitioned from bring on the regulation to we can't really do that because we're going to slow down U.S. competitiveness in artificial intelligence unless you just let us go full rein and go full steam ahead. And of course, especially against China, which is the addendum that, like we're just saying, we'll continue to hear is the motivation for U.S. leadership to want to do this thing with these companies in that way, because they see this as an opportunity to really kind of rise above and be the leader.
Right, and I think this again is, as you said, it's a political story. And what was happening during the Biden administration, they were trying to say, "Oh no, we're going to get along, guys. We're going to be helpful here, and you don't want to mess us up, but yeah, sure, regulate us." And that also goes back to something I heard Alex Karp of Planeteer say at a conference in Vienna like 6 years ago, where he was, "Oh no, we should be regulated. We should be regulated." And what he was really saying, the subtext of this was, you set the rules. We aren't going to set any rules. We'll do whatever we can within the limits you give us. So go ahead and give us limits. That's fine.
Yes.
And then we're all in the same limits. But then
we'll
full
play the
speed
game
ahead, whatever we want to do, because it's not up to us, the tech companies, to set the standards for our behavior. It's your job as lawmakers, which I think is completely wrong and darn near amoral. but that was kind of the stance. And now with the Trump administration and with Vance, Peter Thiel's creation in a great measure, as vice president, I think they sense there's a whole different possibility here, and they could get by without regulation. And I think that's really important. I don't know if did you put the budget story in here? No, I think you did. So right before we got on, buried in the really really huge budget legislation, there is a clause forbidding any state level regulation of AI for 10 years. God knows whether that survives the whole process, but it shows an indication here, and odd from the states' rights people, but it's a way to say it's a very tech-friendly amendment in there or clause in there that says there'll be one authority when it comes to AI, and it's the federal government, and the federal government's going to do this limited amount with AI regulation, and that's that. So I think that the AI boys see it's Wild West time.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to do whatever we want. And so they want to change their tune so they don't get their own words fed back to them when there are efforts to regulate them.
Yeah, indeed. There was another article related to this that also I think you put it in the rundown, but caught my attention separately, which is Silicon Valley's biggest legacy tech companies having a midlife crisis, which I could identify with this in different terms, I suppose. AI threatening their dominance, according to Tim Higgins at the Wall Street Journal, and just kind of talking about the classic, case of innovators' dilemma, which is that these companies, we're talking Apple, we're talking Google, Meta, Elon Musk thrown in there, Tesla facing this, where they've really created their business and become the big players that they are. And now, in light of this moment that we are in, the rapid development of artificial intelligence and so many competitors kind of on the sidelines, they're having a challenge. They're all collectively having a challenge, kind of being the innovators when it comes to this new realm. We've talked about Apple and their struggles around AI, which has been kind of an interesting thing to see for a company like Apple that we're not used to seeing kind of drop the ball in a similar way. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's been had a big impact on the company in recent months. Google seeing its a real honest to goodness threat to its legacy search business and how it feeds ads into search and monetizes that way. Meta, hedging its bets on the metaverse and saying this is the thing, and then having to kind of reverse course and say, oh, well, actually we were wrong. It's thing, AI, really. Right. And then having to kind of backpedal and change its, transition its strategy there. And it's just kind of interesting to see that, see them be challenged in this way.
There's a hilarious quote I want to just get in here as a sideline here. The journal quotes Musk talking about Tesla saying, "We're not on the edge of death, not even close," Musk told analysts, said the journal. His protest sounded like that Monty Python and the Holy Grail character about to be thrown on a pile of corpses. "I'm not dead, I feel happy." Which is kind of unusual in a journal business story to get a Monty Python reference. And
I love it though. I'm here for it. Do more of that. That's what we need.
There's a great fake video going around, an AI video on Facebook and stuff, with little babies in the mud playing out a Monty Python scene. And John Cleese just came onto Facebook and shared it and said, "Brilliant." So it's an endorsement of AI. Anyway, back to your point. I think this is a perennial story, right? The old guys are gone. Is so-and-so the king of the world now dethroned? Have they had their day? That story was written in its day about IBM and about Microsoft, and they're still around. But some of these won't be. And we don't know which ones will go away. Alta Vista was going to be the king of the world, and it's gone.
Oh, right.
So,
yeah,
so it's
totally.
just a constant in journalism trying to push them on the throne and see if they fall off.
Yeah, sure.
And then the other part of this is, with DeepSeek and Perplexity and OpenAI and Anthropic out there, I think it remains a question whether or not they're going to be winners or the old guys going to be winners. And, we see Amazon.
It's still early.
Right. Amazon's out there doing a lot. Microsoft in its dalliance with OpenAI of who comes out on top there. So yeah, it's very early, but the journalists are trying to. Journalists should not be in the job of prediction. They're bad at it. There's no knowing, and it's not what they should do. But they can't help themselves. They want to seem really savvy and smart about the world. So it's interesting just to see. This is a vibe check.
Yeah, well, I realize what's coming to mind for me is less about AI and more about the art of journalism.
Yeah.
Do you see a story like this from your perspective in this field for as long as you have been in this field? As
He's saying I'm really old, folks, which I am.
No, I'm saying that you are well studied in the world of journalism, far more studied than I am. I'm gonna redirect that. And so, do you see a story like this, and you kind of put it into a box of like, oh yeah, this is like what a journalist will write when they don't have something else to write. It's always the kind of thing you go back to, which is, because this is a constant thread that's always going to be there, is that the people at the top will always be challenged.
Right, and editors love these kinds of stories because it'll get you good play. I think this was on the homepage of the journal, and so it's provocative. It's not unlike New York Magazine doing a list of the top bagels in New York. Or when I lived in San Francisco, I used to be on KGO with Ron Owens, who was a famous talk show host there. And I would watch the phone line, and it's like watching the chat, and if there's nobody in it, it's sad. So I'd watch the phone lines, and they'd be dead, and I'd finally say, you can't get good pizza in San Francisco. Boom! The phone lines will light up. So yeah, it's an effort to be provocative. Yeah. And by the way,
Excellent.
You can't get good pizza in San Francisco. I just want to say.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I've had some good pizza in New York for sure. Hopefully next time
hello.
Yeah?
Of course you have.
But I haven't had enough of it, so I need to go back and really, really scrutinize. Anyways, we're gonna take a quick break, and then when we come back, we got more kind of political stuff going on before we are able to escape the political fire. So that's coming up. Talking about the Copyright Office and what that means for fair use and AI training in a second. All right, last week, the U.S. Copyright Office released a pre-publication version of its report on how copyright law would apply to generative AI training, which is obviously something that we talk about quite a bit. Companies taking information that's found online, be it procured through BitTorrents or just found on the open web, and using it to train their systems, and copyright holders saying, hey, that's not fair, you shouldn't be able to do this, and the defense being, well, it's fair use. I mean, the information's out there, it's free. We talk about this all the time. This report is open for public comment. It concluded that whether a work qualifies as fair use depends on specific facts that relate to each case on a case-by-case basis, essentially. Things like source and purpose of the data, control of the outputs, potential market effects, which honestly, this just kind of sounds very familiar to me. Some uses like non-commercial use, things like research, very likely to be fair use. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. Commercial uses that compete with original works, especially if they're sourced from pirated content, unlikely to qualify, according to where this is at this point anyways. And I think the big controversy around this is that happened, and then I think a day later, President Trump fired the Register of Copyright's Shira Perlmutter and Librarian of Congress. And so, of course, there was a lot of speculation about the potential connection and proximity of the report and of the firings. I don't follow politics nearly enough to know whether they are actually truly related or not. I'm kind of more interested in the report itself and and the potential impact that has on how AI training is seen from a copyright and fair use perspective in the U.S. in the future as a result. What do you think?
So this is a hobby horse of mine because I argue unpopularly that training, if acquired properly, is fair use and is transformative, and that we want AI models to be trained on decent information and content. Mm-hmm. And quoting is a different matter, and again, acquisition is a different matter. That's been my contention for quite some time. What we see here is a fascinating yin-yang of not just the politics, but also the lobbying and who has the greater lobbying power. Because what you see on the one hand, of course, is every media company on earth is going to say, oh, no, you must get permission, you must license, you must pay us a fortune, you may not use our stuff. And the tech companies are going to say, no, it's fair use. We should be able to just read this. If you can read each other, so can we. And that's the fight going on. And what we see here is the clash of lobbyists. And so it's both left and right. It's not a left or right issue, really. It's almost like it's New York lobbyists versus California lobbyists, right? And media lobbyists versus AI lobbyists. And we're going to see that go on. As a little sideline, I just recorded the audiobook version of Magazine.
Oh, how's your voice?
Bloomsbury. Oh, I did it in one day. I did the whole thing. It's thin. It's thin.
It's a shorter book. Yeah.
I did it in one day. But here's the interesting thing. At the end of the reading, you get that thing where this has been Magazine, read to you by the author, Jeff Jarvis. All rights reserved by copyright, whatever. And Then they added a line in there that I gulped at because no part of this book may be used to train any artificial intelligence in this universe or any other universe henceforth or here to come. And
Interesting.
I said, I don't want that coming out of my mouth. I testified in the Senate to the exact opposite. I'm on podcasts every week, blathering to the opposite. So I recorded as a good boy because the engineer said, no, you got to record it. So I recorded it. Then I did another version where I said, even though the author disagrees, this book may not be used right now. Right? and then I emailed the very nice audio guy at Bloomsbury, and I said, okay, I see three choices here. 1, take that line out for this book. 2, use my joke line. 3, use somebody else's voice. I don't want this coming out of my larynx. And so they're having somebody else, they're going to pick up other voice to record that line.
Oh,
so
good.
At least it can't be used from me. But the book still supposedly can't be used. But you know what? People, if you want to use it, if you want to think about magazines, go ahead, use it. Shh, I didn't tell you.
Just don't tell anybody.
Just do it.
Maybe don't get it. Maybe don't do that though through the use of BitTorrent. Just
but you could. There's ways you can get PDFs. Go, ask me. In fact, I'll sneak it to you. Okay? Because I'd like to be included.
Oh boy, I hope they don't listen.
Anyway, be that as it may. So I think this is an interesting conflict here. But the other thing I think we're going to see play out, Jason, is I'm not sure that this is going to be the Copyright Office's decision at all. They're going to have an opinion, but this is going to come down, I think, in the courts. And the courts are going to say there's long-standing doctrine about fair use, and we're going to have to apply that. Now, fair use, to the frustration of many, is never well defined. Lawrence Lessig of Harvard famously said that fair use is the right to hire an attorney to defend your use as fair use.
Sounds about right.
That is. And there's never any set, there's no, 25 words or 26 words is not fair use. Nope. It's dependent upon all these conditions, whether it's transformative, whether it's additive, and so on. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't try to express.
And it's always a reaction to. It's like, I think a lot of people, and I know that I'm guilty of this too, but I think I've learned enough to know this by now, is that fair use is often thrown out as if it's a thing to adhere to in advance, but it's a reactionary thing.
Sure.
Because it's defined on a case-by-case basis, there is no doing something truly with fair use in mind. It just might come up later, and you might have to defend yourself on the basis of it and hope that you are right.
As an individual creator, absolutely right. But if you have corporate lawyers, it's different. Okay. Because the corporate lawyers will constantly, and I did this all the time, where they would say, oh, no, you've quoted too much. I remember sitting in a meeting with the Condé Nast lawyers where it was the very early days of the internet, of the web, rather, and they talked about use of music. And whenever there was some number of seconds, and the lawyer made us all sit there in absolute silence for 15 seconds or 90 seconds, whatever it was. And he said, see, that's longer than you think. So it's a judgment call, and corporate lawyers will try to mitigate risk, and so they'll try to stop you from using anything. And nowadays, it's also, it's ridiculous that we can't play YouTube videos here without fear being taken down because of bad copyright calls. Because what we do is comment on them. That is fair use. But what happens? YouTube doesn't want to get screwed up with lawyers themselves, so they play safe, and others exploit that. That's the mess we're in here. It's more direct, one for one, when you quote it or play it on YouTube. It's a little bit different, though, I think, when you get into training. So we'll see where this goes. Obviously, we also have lots of court cases going on. We have New York Times case has been agglomerated with others. So we'll see. But the fascinating thing here is it would appear as if the tech fans in the White House and around them had a victory by getting rid of the anti-copyright people or anti-fair use people, pissing off the left every which way. And it would have appeared that Elon Musk was a victor in that because he wants that for his...
Grok.
Thank you, Grok. I hate to say it.
Grok. Just
Grok.
makes me think of like a wrestler or something. I'm Grok.
The way you say it makes me sound like a frog. It makes it sound like a frog. Grok. Grok. So, but now it appears that whoever they're going to appoint may be even tougher.
Oh, interesting.
When two men showed up at the Copyright Office inside the Library of Congress carrying letters purporting to appoint them to acting leadership positions, the Doge takeover appeared to be complete. But, says The Verge, those two men, Paul Perkins and Brian Neves, were not Doge at all, but instead approved by the MAGA wing of the Trump coalition that aims to put tech companies in check. Mm-hmm. So this is, again, within each side of the spectrum, there's a fight going on. So the MAGA side says, no, we hate tech companies. They have too much power. We're the powerful ones here. And Musk and company and Vance are saying, no, we love tech companies. So somebody wasn't paying attention. And Perkins, who's now the supposed acting director of copyrights, is an 8-year veteran of the DOJ who served the first Trump administration. Neves is the putative acting deputy librarian. And they've supposedly are on the other side of this. So this is going to be really interesting to see where this plays out. And meanwhile, other things are caught in the middle. The Librarian of Congress is much respected, and she may have been gotten rid of because she's black. She may have been gotten rid of because of copyright. We're not sure. But and Congress is not too happy that the Librarian of Congress was summarily fired. So copyright's going to get mixed in AI with a much bigger battle of egos, I think, here.
Interesting. Yep. Big time overlap in the Venn diagram of politics and technology happening right now with the first half of this show and life. Yeah. Is Rick Lewis, who is the former Audible employee who voiced Audible hopes you've enjoyed this program, going to be the one to do the voice for you? Probably not. He's a former employee. So.
Oh, really?
No, probably not.
I thought employee of yours. Oh, I see.
No, not of me. No. Well, no, a former employee of Audible, according to AI Overview, anyways.
What they're likely to do, however, is that just playing off the rundown here, Audible, in fact, just unveiled a plan to use AI voices, 100 different AI voices that you can use in English and other languages to do books. On the one hand, as a reader, that makes me happy because there's all kinds of books I would like to listen to rather than read, because I can do it in the car and fit it in. On the other hand, as an author and reader, no, I want to record my own book. But that's still expensive. It was a full day in the studio, a full day with an engineer, and then as many flubs as I make, probably a full day with the editor, and then whatever else they manage to do. It's not even though I don't get paid. I didn't get paid to record my book this time. It's not cheap to do that. So I think Audible will make major headway on this. But that was an aside.
Well, and it is, but I'm happy you brought it up because this is not the first time that Audible has done this. If you were self-publishing, you could do this starting in 2023. And this new thing is really tailored for publishers to get in on it, like you said, and to do it on a more official level. I have not. I talked about this with Tom Merritt on Daily Tech News Show yesterday. I don't know that I've heard an Audible ebook or audiobook read by AI. Have you?
I haven't yet either. No. There have been those old voicing technology you could get, but that was really pretty awful.
Yeah.
I tried to listen to a 600-page book that way, and I just couldn't do it. That's years ago.
Right, and I know that it's improved a lot, but and even the systems that sound really good today, I can still detect it, and once I detect it, it becomes a little bit of a distraction for me. as opposed to just like really falling into a nice audiobook, which I've listened to, I don't know how many hundreds of audiobooks over the years. And so I love the audiobook format. I have confidence that at some point this technology is going to get to the point to where all of those little subtleties that become clues and pull you out are no longer there. But I haven't listened to these new ones to know whether we're there yet. I don't know.
No, I don't think so. It depends on the book.
Yeah.
But last time I recorded a book at the same studio, JMM in New York, there were people there who were performing, and it was performing. It wasn't just reading. Book, youth fiction, young adult fiction, and a lot more dramatization there. I'll give you an example here from magazine. The AI couldn't do. So I'm in the part talking about the launch of Entertainment Weekly and the junk mail that was sent out. And I'm going to read this. That brochure was in turn stuffed in an envelope with other accoutrements of junk mail. A letter, purportedly from me, a card touting the offer, free videotape rewinder with order, or 4 free issues, and a return envelope. Send no cash. All penned by a legendary guru of junk mail who produced breath-robbing prose such as this. Save time, save money. Entertainment Weekly trims the fat from your entertainment diet as you sit reading, right? That smart-ass stuff is not going to be done by AI. Never. There's no way you can do anything.
Be done straight.
And yeah. So that needed me to make a fool of myself. As I did.
Yes, but that's the personality. That's that personality aspect.
Right.
The humanity, the kind of imperfection / unpredictability, or maybe predictability that a machine can't pick up on because it just sees words. It doesn't see intention. It doesn't see irony, or you know what I mean. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't always read between the layers in a way that we do when we read that content with our eyes.
Yeah, and we've talked many times. I've talked about the desire for a markup language for language, audio language, where you could I think say, this is serious, this is a joke, this is light, this is happy. I think you could do that, but you couldn't enter in the context of junk mail sounding like this.
Totally.
What does junk mail sound like? It doesn't have a sound. There is no training set for that. You're imputing something in it. But enough about me.
And what that even means. Yeah. Interesting. Google had a big day yesterday. So next week, by the way, Google I/O happening on Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to be in Mountain View for day 1 of Google I/O. I considered staying the night, but I didn't want to miss AI Inside the next day. So it's going to be a real long Tuesday. And I got a lot of work to do during that day. I've got a couple of interviews lined up and everything.
So before we got on today, Jason was complaining that he had too much coffee this morning. Next week, he's going to need it.
Yeah. No, because I tip the scales at a certain point, and then it does the opposite for my productivity. So I got to be careful. But anyways, so next Wednesday we will have a normal episode. I do have an interview scheduled at Google I/O, and I'm uncertain whether that's going to be a Saturday interview like we did with Emily Bender and Alex Hanna, or if it's just going to be the Wednesday episode. I'm going to have to play it by ear based on what the interview is on Tuesday at Google I/O, but it has to do with AI and search, and I'm really looking forward to it. So that'll be cool. But this year's a little different because usually Google I/O, it is a developers conference. News around Android, which is my other passion, is often takes a very large stage at Google I/O. This year they decided Android should have its own thing a week before I/O. And notably, I think this is because I/O is going to be filled with artificial intelligence news. Some of which we know now based on the news that was released yesterday. So just kind of giving you some context, there's probably a lot of AI news coming from Google next week, and I will be on the scene. So, maybe I can throw stuff together that makes the show a little bit more special because of that. But the news yesterday was that, related to AI anyways, is that Gemini is expanding beyond just the smartphones, which we've been getting Gemini integration in Android devices and on iOS through an app for a while now. And now Google is finally bringing it to Wear OS, bringing it to Android Auto, as well as cars that have Google built in, which is kind of a separate thing from Android Auto, Google TV, XR devices. I have a really good feeling we're going to hear more about XR at I/O, so that's something I'm looking forward to. Earbuds. Basically, Gemini coming to all the places you're used to seeing Google Assistant. And Google Assistant isn't dead, but it certainly has one more, I think as I said yesterday, one more toe out the door. It keeps getting
in the ground.
It keeps getting closer and closer to retirement. It's wondering what it's going to do when it no longer has to work.
I think this is potentially a big deal. I'll be eager to hear your prognostication, even though I just said we don't repeat. Because now it's an add-on, it's a nodule on side to search. And what they've got to try to do is two things. One is to get us to use it everywhere. So they've got to offer it everywhere.
Yes.
And then two is to make it a habit from us, a reflex, better said, from us to say, oh, I'll ask that. This is what I'll do now. And to me, the big one is going to be the car. Because there are times when I want to know something while I'm driving, and it won't answer that. No, that's not what I do now.
Or you don't know how to ask the right thing, right? Because Google Assistant is very syntax driven, and it's not very good at like figuring out what you actually meant when you say things outside of its syntax.
That's true too. Though there are times in the car when the problem is when I want something that's out of context. Like, what's the Dow Jones right now?
Right.
No, not going to do it. No, you can't make me.
Super interesting that you bring this up. So yesterday on the Android Faithful podcast, another podcast that I do, we played an interview that I and Florence Ion, one of the other hosts on Android Faithful, had with Patrick Brady, who's the VP of Android for cars at Google. And we talked for about 20 minutes about the impact, the potential impact, and the upcoming kind of feature of Gemini being integrated into cars. You're going to see it if you have Android Auto in your vehicle. It's going to update to Gemini instead of Assistant. And the thing that he was kind of describing is very close to what you're talking about.
Good.
It's this idea that like what we know of Gemini, and in particular Gemini Live is going to be part of the Android Auto experience, is that essentially now, whether you want it or not, you have the ability to have a virtual passenger with you. It's not just an assistant that can do, I know it is weird. It's not just an assistant that can do these very limited things for you that it's been programmed to do, but it's Gemini, right? And potentially, Gemini has the ability, and especially Gemini Live has the ability of multimodality, not just voice, but also other things. When I think of the car and I think of the different cameras that show different directions outside of the vehicle or inside of the vehicle, how does that multimodality potentially influence what we think of when we think of these systems in a car? And, he's like, you're going to be driving down the road. And like, he didn't talk much about the multimodality aspect because that isn't part of the announcement. That's just something that I see coming in the future at some point. But he was talking about, you're driving down the road and you're thinking about this interview you're about to have, and you can kind of have a conversation with Gemini Live about that while you're driving. And the cognitive load that is involved in this, because I think this is a big kind of dig on systems like this is, but when you're driving, like, don't be distracted. We don't want distracted driving integrating or, interacting with these systems. The difference here is that Gemini doesn't require that syntax. It is kind of like there's a person sitting next to you. So it's almost, maybe there's probably some differences there, and I'm curious to play around with it, but it's almost like you're talking to someone who's sitting there, and it's about as safe as that, because you don't have to think about how you're projecting or how you're talking. You're just talking.
So as you keep saying, it's like having someone ride with you. I keep on thinking that it's going to occasionally say, why are you going that way? You should go this way.
Right.
You should turn there.
Did you? Yeah, you're driving a little fast. Don't you think you need to slow down?
Or in the comments, Karen McLean Hessel says that some of us like peace and quiet while driving, especially after years of driving kiddos around. So the AI is going to say, are we there yet?
Are we there yet?
Do we have to go shopping? Can we go home?
I love that. Oh, Gemini, could you be my my 6-year-old in the back seat for just 1 minute, Oh man, are we there yet? I love that.
But I also think that these announcements may put Google in a position of advantage over everybody else, because OpenAI can't really do that. Right?
That's
they can't
true.
just be on your phone that easily. They can't be in your car. There's no OpenAI car thing. Yeah, you could go to some effort of doing it, but you're not going to.
They have to make
OpenAI
deals
doesn't
to
have a
make
watch.
that happen. They have to make that happen through deals. Yeah.
Right, right, and that's not going to happen. Well, antitrust, God knows that they'll cry, but Google is already part of our habit in all of these things. It's not just search.
Yeah.
And so if they can make us, as a reflex, start saying, "Oh yeah, I can just ask the question. I can just have this conversation,"
Right.
then they're in the position to have that conversation with us like no one else. Apple can be there with your phone and your watch and your car. Not so much on search, though of course now Apple's starting to make independent noises about search. But Google's in the leading position there. But I guess they probably don't want to play it too hard because then they'll get accused of antitrust there.
I mean, they're in kind of a tricky position when it comes to like that.
But I do think this will be interesting to see how, which is all the weirder then, I think, Jason, why they chose to separate AI. I mean, this was all announced at the Android event, yeah?
Yes, yesterday's the Android show. This was announcements yesterday, and that is interesting. Why was this?
If
not
you were
next?
trying to push Google's preeminence in AI, I would have thought this would have been part and parcel still of I/O, because even though it's a developers conference, it's also a media conference, and see what you think.
Well, no, I think possibly the reason why yesterday and not a week from now is because it is an AI story, it is a Gemini story, but it's also an Android story.
Yes.
And if their intention was to separate Android from the AI news that comes next week, part of the big, push of Android right now is that we've got all these different devices, all these different form factors, and now all of those devices have the Gemini the way you've had it on a smartphone.
Right.
So I can understand why they did it yesterday. Also might be to pave the way for whatever the announcements are next week that are kind of tack on to it,
So I didn't watch it, obviously, because I'm learning about it from you. Was this a recorded thing or was it live?
Oh, the Google announcements or the Android show? Yeah, it was pre-recorded.
Yeah.
It was
How
all
tacky was it? Because they're always tacky when they're pre-recorded.
I didn't honestly, because being a journalist and working with Google behind the scenes on embargoes and getting information and everything, I created a video around this on my personal channel. I watched part of it, but I didn't watch all of it because I kind of had most of the information that they were announcing anyways, and it was informing some of the reporting that I was doing. So, but I mean, it seemed fine. Samir Samat, who leads the Android team, he was part of it, and he looked good in his position. I mean, but it was as good as any of the pre-recorded, announcy things that are repurposed to be live events, even though they're not actually live. It's kind of a, I don't know, a highly controlled environment for those sort of things. So it's kind of interesting making it a big deal because it's just a pre-recorded video that's playing as a premiere for everyone. But I mean, it was I think it was effective. I think it got some attention. It does make me wonder, like, okay, well, so Android does that mean that Android is less important? And I mean, I don't know that Android is less important to a grand scale to Google right now, because I think it's really important to have all of those surfaces for its other things to appear into, search and AI and everything. But no question, next week's conference, it might be marked or labeled a developer conference, but it is really an excitement generating platform for everything Google's doing in AI.
Yep.
Continues
after the keynote. It's developer, but the keynote is media and market.
Yeah, indeed. They also announced a bunch of like scam protection extension features for smartphones. So onboard AI is getting better if you have Android devices at recognizing if you're in a phone call with someone and they're scamming you. Like, for instance, the onboard AI can recognize if you're in a call with a banking institution and then you on your phone go to make changes to accessibility features or uncheck unknown sources or check unknown sources, which is how scammers get you to install things that they want you to install on your device or hand over permissions and stuff like that. And so it'll recognize this and be like, hey, wait a minute. If you're on a phone with a banking institution, they would not ask you to do this. Do not do this.
Good.
These which are great. I love features like that. It's going to save some people.
Great. That's really great.
For sure. Okay. Boy. Oh, we're running a little long. So let's see here. A study published earlier this month looked at the impact of ChatGPT on students. And I know you've probably got thoughts on this, on learning higher order thinking in educational scenarios as researchers at Hangzhou Normal University in China. And I was kind of looking into it. I was like, all right, who funded this? But it looks like it's just the university study. Showed some pretty positive effects with strong impacts on skill, on competency development courses. Also, when used in problem-based learning environments, the study actually showed that ChatGPT is very effective at encouraging higher order thinking, kind of like acting as an intelligent tutor. So something to collaborate with, great for STEM fields, that sort of stuff. On the flip side, the study says that benefits in project-based learning, less noticeable. They actually diminish with overuse. So one of the things that they really recommend here is that students commit to using these tools straight for like 4 to 8 weeks, long enough to get the habits and the understanding, but short enough that they don't over rely on it in the long run and become too reliant upon it that they aren't kind of like flexing their own knowledge and their own processes in order to understand. But what do you think as an educator?
So we hear a lot of moral panic about this. The New York Magazine had a big piece about 2 weeks ago saying, education's ruined and we have to rethink things.
Lots
and
of moral
it's
panic,
all wrong. And students aren't reading anymore. And it's just constantly looking down at our own children and our own young people as if we're better than them. And that's a lot of what this is. So this one stands out. This was not an experiment in and of itself. It was a meta-analysis of 51 separate research studies. But data people like that because they feel that it gives them more breadth of data to look at. So again, as you said, it's moderately positive impact on enhancing learning perception, large positive impact on improving learning performance, higher order thinking, moderate impact, good impact again. So this just stood out to say, hold on, it's not all bad. It can be good. Keep an open mind. I was at an event last night, a screening of a film about Hannah Arendt from the Hannah Arendt Center at Bard College in New York. And I was sitting at dinner with a couple of professors, and they're talking about this. And the smart professors are figuring out how to use this in their pedagogy. They're figuring out how to make it a tool to teach students in new ways, to have them reason with it, to have them challenge it, to have them figure it out. And I think that's the way, it's just here. You got to accept that it's going to be here.
Right.
And that's that. At the last minute, I put another story in that which just made me really laugh, that a student at Northeastern University filed a complaint against her professor because the professor said, you may not use ChatGPT in any class. You're going to be in big trouble if you do. And then she caught the professor in all kinds of uses of ChatGPT in the professor's own notes, the professor's own presentations and everything else. So she's demanding a refund.
I bet this happens a lot, Jeff.
Oh yeah.
I think this happens a lot. That's my completely, totally random, just guessing about how the world works. But I bet there are a lot of people that have the rules in place to say, do not use these things for this purpose. And yet they do.
And here I am, I'm AI happy boy here on the podcast and working on other things about AI. But I find myself a lot more skeptical of its use on the teaching side than a lot of my colleagues in the biz. And I get shocked. I guess I should be careful, but I'm part of a group that was looking at some new programs, and they were like dueling ChatGPT. Well, I ran a ChatGPT report, and look what it said about the future of jobs. Another one said, yes, well, I ran another one. Look what it said about the future of jobs. And I read the reports, and I thought, well, they're not creative enough. They're missing stuff. They're not doing things.
Yeah, right.
There's a reflex on the teaching side on AI. At the same time, there's a reflexive fear for the students on AI. So it's really interesting, and I love this. The students are smartasses. Students are going to get you. They're going to keep your eye out on you. And so this one student, New York Times story, came across the notes that the professor had put out, and there in the middle of it was obviously an instruction to ChatGPT to, quote, expand on all areas, be more detailed and specific. It was followed by a list of positive and negative leadership traits, each with prosaic definition and bullet-pointed example. And she pointed it out to a friend in the classroom and said, "Did you see the notes he put on Canvas? He made it with ChatGPT." "OMG, stop!" the classmate responded. "What the hell?" So you gotta love this. There was another story that we don't have time for in the rundown, but just real quickly, is that hiring executives are going nuts because applicants are using AI. Well, we all know that the hiring side is using AI, so fair game, folks.
Yeah. Yes. I love the synergy of today's show. I love it.
Isn't this great? I was in another meeting yesterday about a new program, and somebody was coming in with the data that they have on students and jobs out of certain majors and certain colleges and so on and so forth. And the person who was really expert in the data said, there's a case where a student will not say, "I'm expert in Excel," because it just seems obvious. Of course, we all know Excel.
Yeah.
But if the resumes are being judged by an algorithm, if it doesn't check off Excel, you're rejected. So you've got to market yourself for the algorithm in these HR positions. So of course you're going to use AI.
Oh God, this is so present in my life in this very moment.
College
and I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. Because I am at a point right now where I am on the search for an editor. I want to create more stuff, and so as a business owner, I am in a position. I'm trying to create this and build this kind of content business. And I recognize that I have more ideas and more desire to put out more stuff, but I don't have the time to do the video editing on all of it. And so I'm kind of at a position right now where I have to pay out a little money that I don't necessarily have in order to increase the money on the other side. At least that's my hope and my goal. That's what you do as a business. And so what you're talking about is exactly is very, very prescient and like connects exactly to where I'm at right now, because I'm looking at all these different directions for hiring someone, right? Someone, kind of first point, someone advised me very recently in my job post to hide random queries and traps in the job posting to mess with applicants who run their stuff through AI systems. Like what? Well, you just might put in to a random point, make sure that the word avocado is in your response somewhere. Something along those lines. I mean, that's just a ridiculous kind of idea, but the idea is to, in the posting, if someone is using AI to respond to like 20 or 30 different applications and give each application exactly what they're looking for, they run my posting through. The AI model sees, make sure the word coconut is somewhere in the response. And then when I get the response from them, if they didn't check it, I see the word coconut. I know that they're inauthentic, that they just basically ran through a system and gave me a thing. And that becomes a weeder part of the process. It weeds people out, right?
It's AI v AI. It's like that old cartoon Spy v Spy.
Yeah, right. Right? Totally. And I was like, I would never have considered doing that, but I guess that makes sense.
As a musician, right? That's like the old theory about why you demanded no blue M&Ms in your concert writer.
That's right? Exactly it.
Because if they really read it, then you'd know that there were no blue M&Ms.
You knew that they were taking care of you the way that you needed to be taken care of, whatever. Some of my applicants are not from the U.S. They're in foreign countries, and yet what I see in some of the responses is that really recognizable, glossy kind of quality. Like everything is really perfectly worded, which is not to say that people outside of the US can't write in that way. Sure, they can. But I've worked with the systems enough to recognize, or feel like I recognize, that glassy quality of AI generated text that hasn't been edited also, and so it's this point of like authenticity, I guess, at the end of the day, is like, as a human looking for someone, I get it. I use the tools. I'm open to it. Like, it would be hypocritical of me to say don't use the tools, because I totally do. But at the same time, I'm also a little hesitant when things are just a little too polished or not not having some sort of humanity in the process, not authenticity.
It's a whole string of yes buts in these discussions, because I could
Yeah.
also argue that if somebody has English as a second or third language, they're probably smarter than we are, because it's amazing that they're multilingual.
Yeah.
But they want to use AI to smooth out the language. They're
Yes,
code switching
totally.
for us because we're Americans and we expect everybody to speak English like we do.
Yep.
Right. And you could yes but yourself going around. And I've been thinking a lot lately. I was talking to somebody who's trying to start something we'll probably talk about in a few months when they get going. And the need to have authentic humanity guaranteed, and ways to do that, which I think is really important. And I think there's going to be a huge opportunities around that, is to know that you're dealing with a person. But there's nothing to say
Right.
that person isn't using ChatGPT and just
Do you
cut and
truly
pasting.
know?
So
Do you really know?
There's no guarantees.
No guarantees. No. And Lauren Good posted an article that's kind of, very largely about exactly what we're talking about here. That's why I say I love the synergy of today's episode. It all really feeds into itself so well. On Wired, deepfake scams in the age of paranoia. And, we don't need to go too deeply into it, but it was just, when I read through this article, it reminded me of kind of the hiring process that I'm going through, which really tied in with what you were talking about. And just the fact that, there are ways that we can think that we can check, for inauthentic work, like deepfake detectors, biometric verification, code words, low tech solutions like code words, like I was talking about, different things. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what the impact is happening of these tools is that people are shrinking their circles. They're relying more on a personal referral or personal connections instead of casting wide nets the way they used to, because that trust factor is lessened because of the tools.
But
or at least
ironically, that
it.
only then deepens the old boy or girl network, where you only got jobs in the context. My daughter's trying to look for a job. She's in an area where I don't really have contacts, and she doesn't really want to use mine anyway, and she doesn't have them. And so she sends resumes off, and because she doesn't have that connection, she can get nowhere because you can't get past the machine.
Yeah. So, that's so fascinating. Anyways, contact at AIinside.show if you got thoughts on this. I'd love to hear it, because I think this is a very...
We have a good comment from our dear friend Ozone Nightmare.
Oh, yes. Hey! First... By the way, thank you, Ozone Nightmare. First super chat on AI Inside, because the YouTube channel is officially at the point to where this is allowed. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Huge support, and we really appreciate you. Yeah, it says this is the core issue with the let AI run wild, we'll figure it out later philosophy. If we have no requirements, then how can we have any faith in the accountability of the tools or their users?
Right.
And this is just
Well said.
Yeah. Indeed. Always. Thank you so much for sharing that. So good to see you. Good to have you here with us. Cool. All right. Well, we do have a little bit more. I know we've run a little long today, but that's just because it's been a lot of fun to talk about.
I talk a lot.
We both do. And that's what we do. That's what a podcast is. Going to take a quick break, come back, and talk about another talk a lot that we had with a guest. That's coming up in a second. All right, we're going to round things out with a piece of a conversation that Jeff and I had about a week and a half ago with Robert Hallock, who is the channel segment GM at Intel. So Intel reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in talking about AI PCs on AI Inside? We had a full, awesome conversation with Robert about AI PCs. It's going to be in the feed this Saturday, similar fashion of what we did with the Emily Bender and Alex Hanna interview a couple of weeks ago. It came out on Saturday. And I have a little clip from it so you can kind of get a taste of what to expect this Saturday. But the topic, again, AI PCs. What exactly is an AI PC? Here's a clip where we talk about exactly that. With the AI PC, I guess at its foundation on a fundamental level, maybe give us an overview of what Intel means when the company talks about an AI PC, what it is, and why right now really matters when we're talking about a shift to AI PCs.
Yeah, so I think there's two things that people need to know to kind of answer that question. The first thing is, when we say AI PC, what we mean is a computer that does AI stuff offline, no internet connection, right? It's much more personal, much more private. It's your stuff on your computer. Okay, so that's one. The other thing that's important to know is that running that AI stuff requires, it doesn't require, but it's much faster if you have it, special hardware. And so when Intel says AI PC, we're talking about these offline applications using this local accelerating hardware. And those PCs may be 20 or 30 times faster at running an AI-based workload.
Okay. So I guess maybe we could talk a little bit about the architectural differences and what makes them different and unique. Because often when I think of like an AI PC in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, it can do all these things, but it's also kind of a normal PC as well, right? Like it's not just specific to AI. It's just far more capable of handling AI workloads than a standard PC. What makes it so different from an architectural perspective?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge and accept that AI PC is a buzzword, right? And it's a buzzword because it helps us communicate that something is new and different here. But if you peel back the layers, what Intel and all the other industry players are really saying here is that we all believe, and Intel believes, that AI is going to be a huge part of what it is to use your computer on a daily basis. And when each individual person encounters that reality, that's going to depend on how you use your computer and what apps you use. But this is like inevitable. Everybody is going to have this, right? And so we're trying to set the foundation now, because when this reaches the full maturation, maybe 2027, 2028, everybody collectively needs a really robust, stable foundation for all of this stuff to live on. And so you have to start that work 3 to 5 years in advance. And that's kind of where we are now in the journey, 2 to 3 more years ahead of this before it's like mainstream and everywhere. But, at the end of the day, it's the next way that companies will deliver performance, battery life, energy efficiency, like all the things we care about as fundamentals on a PC. AI is just the next one.
What's Intel's role going to be in that stack? Obviously, the chip and the fundamental hardware. As Nvidia has CUDA and has software, does Intel play in that? And then does Intel also play potentially, as it used to, and I'll show you something in a minute, in branded Intel hardware? Where does the plan likely take you along that? And not just PCs, by the way, but also phones and other things.
When we talk about where Intel is involved in what we're helping with, there's this huge industry enabling piece, which is really invisible to most people. Running an AI piece of software is a very complicated software stack. It actually resembles 3D graphics more than not. And as we all know, that requires drivers and frameworks and APIs and runtimes and libraries, and AI is totally the same. And so that means AI is a complex place with a lot of middleware. And so that's thing one that Intel is working on, making sure that all these frameworks and runtimes that people might want to grab off the shelf, in addition to our own OpenVINO framework, that those all run on Intel hardware, on all the engines capable of running AI. So that's thing one. Thing two is we have this massive network of ISVs. Intel is, if nothing else, amazing at interbusiness relationships. And we collect an enormous amount of information from them on where their software is headed, what they want to do with it, what engines it's going to use, what APIs, frameworks. And so we're using that to steer our roadmap. So engaging with ISVs to help them build a feature, market a feature, get it to market, make sure it's optimized and fast. That's thing two that we do. And the third thing is making sure that these AI experiences are communicated broadly to people. And that could be end users, it could be yourselves. That's why we're talking today. It could be to retail partners, distributors, but there's a massive amount of education that has to happen. And that too is only partially visible to the extent that you can run into it in a podcast or a web page. But those are the big three things that Intel is working on. So it's one part software, one part education, one part ecosystem building, and we view the hardware as like a baseline table stakes.
All right, let's see here. Back to the way we were. Yep. So there we go. Excellent conversation with him. It was interesting to, I think what he did say about it being just kind of like a buzzword, because I would hear AI PCs and I'd be like, oh, this is so, is this so different? What exactly does that mean? And it really is. I think one thing that really stood out for me is that he compares AI's kind of current hardware evolution to integrated graphics from years past, and how that became very quietly but very imperatively essential in computer hardware, kind of behind the scenes, and saw that kind of broad adoption over time as a result. And then it was just everywhere. And he believes that's where this is all headed.
I found the conversation really educational. There's a lot that and I think you bring up the thing that gratified me more than anything else. I have been trying to ask again and again and again, why were graphics chips, why was Nvidia at the start of all this? What made it? Was it just happenstance? What was it? And he really explained why those chips were perfect and the chicken and egg dance that occurred in terms of why it started that, and then where it went. And I won't try to summarize it because I'll screw that up, but I do recommend watching, because if like me, you're confused about those kinds of basic conceptual ideas around AI and hardware, he was really, really good at explaining that.
Yeah, it was an excellent conversation. So that's coming this Saturday in the feed. If you're subscribed either to the podcast or on YouTube, you don't have to do anything. It'll be there. If not, just check on Saturday. But
subscribe.
You should, yeah,
that's
really,
what you do.
at the
You
end of the day.
Yeah,
subscribe. It's pretty easy to do. AIinside.show. Go there, subscribe. Thank you. Jeff, thank you so much. This was a wonderful time, and learned a lot today. JeffJarvis.com is the site where you can go. Hold on, I have to get my graphics to work. There we go. To get the Web We Weave, of course, Gutenberg parenthesis.
Now in paperback.
Magazine. I love
Very soon to be out in an audiobook.
Soon to be. How long does it take to turn around an audiobook after you record it?
I think they're going to do it pretty quickly. They
Really?
said they were already editing it, and I apologize to whoever the editor was for every single one of my fluffs. And there were many.
Oh, I think that's just par for the course when you're doing an audiobook. You got to do multiple takes, and it's just the way it is to be an audio editor for something like that. I do also want to mention you do another podcast that walks, in similar territory around artificial intelligence and stuff, called Intelligent Machines, for the twit.tv podcast network. I want to throw that out there.
You should mention your other podcast again then.
I love the artwork on this podcast, by the way. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mentioned earlier,
That's right, you did, yes.
Android Faithful. I also do Daily Tech News Show. I'm all over the place. A little too busy for my own good. But anyways, leave us a review if you haven't already. Go to AIinside.show to subscribe to the podcast. And then, of course, if you want to support us directly, you can do that through our Patreon. That's patreon.com/AIinside Show. I'm showing just all sorts of drafts and stuff. Let me get to the right page here. AI Inside Show. There we go. That's the mug that you were looking for. Go there, patreon.com/AIinside Show, and support us directly. We appreciate if you do that. It really does mean a lot to the production of the show. We have wonderful executive producers that support us at a very deep level. You don't have to go that deep if you don't want to. But if you do, we call out your name. Dr. Do, Jeffrey Maricini, WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina, Dante St. James, Bono De Rick, Jason Knifer, Jason Brady, and Anthony Downs, which is our newest executive producer. Great to have so many names to read out. We really appreciate y'all. But that is it for this week's episode. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next Saturday. So this upcoming weekend, look for a new episode, and we'll see you then. Thank you again, everybody. We'll see you then. Bye.